Good morning. And I am Reverend Dr. Jacqueline Triche Atkins, Reverend Jacquie, and I am grateful that each of you are here. We are here. We are very excited to share this morning the whole notion of demonstrations. You believe in demonstrations, don't you? Well, we are very clear that our principles, that all of us, whatever you label your unity or Center for Spiritual Living or whatever, divine science, we have some principles. We have oneness, right? Oneness, is that right? So I'm one with everybody. There is nobody, no matter what they look like, what they do, I'm one with them, right? We have another one of unlimited substance. There is no lack. So there is no reason for anyone not to be housed and fed, and there is none of that, right? Is that correct? Yeah. So we want to make sure that our principles are not, as I like to say, just hanging on the walls of our life, but they're part of our DNA, that they are part of us. And so if they're part of us, some things happen. Some things happen through our spiritual centers, through us, called social justice. That's what it is. So we're going to talk about the way these women have, throughout their spiritual communities, have absolutely done some exciting work. And we're going to talk about it in such a way so that each of you can take it back. I will briefly say that I'm from Chicago, Christ Universal Temple. And it was only about 4 years ago that we started some social justice action, going into the prison. A New Thought church had not been in the prison in Chicago. Why? And working with policies. I know churches don't like politics, but policies. Working with a provision that would provide funding, because there's unlimited funding for those of our homeless brothers and sisters. So why is it taking, why did it, not even asking, because I'm sure all of your churches are very up on this, but I had to ask, why is it taking us so long to use our principles, to take them outside of the church walls, outside of the center walls, take them outside and let them show up as demonstrations? What do you think? Mm-hmm. So we will now have some phenomenal discussion with these beautiful women sitting at the table. We will start with Reverend Fancione, who is the founding director of Sacred Arts and Living Center. It's a teaching chapter affiliated with the Centers for Spiritual Living that was from 2012 to the present in Elk Grove, California. She was an interim minister at East Bay Church of Religious Science 2021 through 2023 in Oakland, California. She was a prayer chaplain minister in Christ Unity Church 2005 to 2008. She has a whole host of degrees that she's gotten, but what I like most about her is that she has been working with social justice. Reverend Fran, put your hands together, you all.
Thank you. Can you hear? Yes. Wonderful. Today I'm talking about social justice in spiritual communities. And I want to start out by inviting you to think with me about some ways in which social justice has been identified. What is social justice? And I borrowed the Catholic Youth Bible that my grandson had in the school that he was attending in the Sacramento area. And in that Catholic Youth Bible, in Amos 5:21 to 24, it says in essence, this is about living in right relationship with our fellow brothers and sisters, making sure that dignity of all is protected and that basic needs of all are met. From the Hebrew and Christian testaments of what we called the Holy Bible when I was growing up, In Psalms and in Isaiah, it says, give justice to the weak and fatherless. Maintain the right of afflicted and the destitute. Learn to do good. Seek justice. Correct oppression. Bring justice to the fatherless and plead the widow's cause. And so as I thought about those particular quotations, I actually moved to what is social justice as it is identified in a wonderful book that I'll talk about a little bit later, called Reading for Diversity and Social Justice, a book I highly recommend. It says, awareness and understanding of social oppression, acknowledgement of one's role in these systems as a privileged and or disadvantaged social group member, and a commitment to develop the vision, watch it, develop the vision, the skills, the resources, and coalitions needed to foster change. That is a significant quotation, I think. And then in our Science of Mind textbook, it says, but faith without works is dead. We should not only pray, we should act. For each contributing the best he has to the common purpose, each willing to make any sacrifice necessary. One, in a certain sense, a selfish one. For we all desire self-preservation. But the other in the greater sense that there can be no individual self-preservation without the preservation of all. Grounding what we're going to say based on some of the things that were just said, I want to take you through a couple of adventures that I have had that helped me to define through action what I think social justice is. And so I want to take you on a multi-year journey for justice that started when I was in ministerial school, way, way back in about the 1980s, about 1984. One day, the director of our ministerial school, then called Ernest Holmes College in the Sacramento area, came in. He had been to Johannesburg and had said that he had met with the minister there, and together they agreed that apartheid should not be abolished. I want you to know that the black students with me were furious at this statement, and at break time, when we got together, one said, I think we ought to leave right now, and spontaneously out of my mouth came, let us change within the United Church of Religious Science spiritual community. Let us create change. Now, I never consciously thought about that commitment that had been lodged within the depth of my being. But a couple of years later, when I was hired as the staff minister, I think that's what they called then, of what was then the First Church of Religious Science, now called the Oakland Center for Spiritual Living, I remember the minister asked me to create a class, and 10 weeks of that, what was then 30-week class, I titled Loving Those That Are Hard to Love, because I thought that all of us have the option to be able to look at somebody that's hard to love and decide what it is that we can do to open ourselves to love. I chose a Reverend Gladys in Johannesburg because she was the one that planted the seed of the statement that was made when I was in ministerial school. And then I remember one time driving across the San Rafael Bridge asking myself, why am I in Berkeley, Oakland, California, going to have a love relationship with somebody in Johannesburg, South Africa? I don't know the person, I'm not near the person, I couldn't figure out how that was going to happen. And I love the fact that there's a part of me that raises questions but doesn't seek the answer right away. What I discovered, though, was that, I would say within a month, several of us were going to Long Beach, California, about 500 miles away from where I lived, to a regional conference. And while there, As I walked in, the president at that time, Dr. Peggy Bassett, announced to the whole group, I want you to meet Reverend Gladys Harrison from Johannesburg, South Africa. She is here to get her ordination. And I said, oh my God. I am to do the work, because she was the one that had talked to the head of the department. So at break time, I went up to Reverend Gladys and I said, could we meet? I have to talk with you. Can we have breakfast or lunch or some meal together? And she agreed that we would have breakfast together. And so the very next morning, about 9 o'clock, Reverend Gladys and I were meeting. Reverend Gladys and Fancione met for 3 hours. Reverend Gladys and Fancione never agreed on one thing based on what I had brought to her attention that I was concerned about. I didn't tell her that she was one that I thought was hard to love. I just said I'm concerned that I had learned this information, and I was alarmed because most of my family were actively engaged in activity at UC Berkeley and other places that were anti-apartheid. So I was around a lot of people, including my own belief system, that was against apartheid in South Africa. We talked for a long time. She said, you don't understand. You don't know what they're doing to one another. You don't know what they're doing to other people. And I said, I don't care what they're doing. I think apartheid needs to stop. And I remember having this very vibrant conversation with her. 3 hours later, we never came to an agreement. But what we came to was a way of being able to hug one another as we were leaving. She took my address, I took hers, and in one way, I thought that was going to be the end of it, except that maybe about 3 months later, I did hear from Reverend Gladys. She said, they're getting ready to have an INTA meeting here in Johannesburg. Would you come and be my house guest? And I said to her, I have 2 children who are getting ready to go to college. I have to take my money and use it that way. And so I did not go. But in my heart, I recognized that Reverend Gladys and I had made the kind of statements to one another that indicated that she felt willing for me to be in her home during the INTA meeting had I arrived there. With all the busy life of a mother of college-going students and the other activity that was in my life, I kind of let that drop for a period of time. But I want you to know that if that was about 1985 to 87, if we take a mental leap into 2003, I went on the Global Heart journey to Mexico with Dr. Kathy and other members of the United Church of Religious Science. At that time it was called, now Centers for Spiritual Living. And while in Mexico for 2 weeks, we had the opportunity to meet with some of the people who were in the community. About 200 people came to a Monday evening session that we were leading. I was to do the global prayer at that time, and others were to speak. Reverend Stephanie was one that I met on that trip. She was standing before all of us talking about the experiences that she had had as she had done some activity against racism and sexism, supporting people who have made a decision or living the life of a gay person. And she was telling us the things that she was doing in the United Kingdom along with her mother. And then they had moved to South Africa. They had moved to Johannesburg. And then she began describing some of her experiences while in Johannesburg. She'd met the Reverend Gladys that I was talking about earlier, had become her student, and they were doing a lot of work against oppression and racism and other kind of activities right there in Johannesburg, the very place that I was concerned about, because by this time apartheid was no longer existing. what happened to me is my ears got hot. Have you had that experience when somebody's talking and your ears get warm? That happened to me. My ears got hot, and I said, something's happening right now to me, and I thought about something that was stunning to me many years before when I had heard an allegory that was written by a wonderful writer. I want to share that allegory with you. Her name is Olive Schreiner. She was an 1800s person who was very active against those people who were not supporting women's rights. She was opposed to negative experiences with people of color. She was writing a book that the Reverend Dr. Howard Thurman edited. I don't know if you know of him, but he was one of my teachers and one that I knew very personally. And when I had heard the story called from a book called A Track to the Water's Edge, by the way, I bought the book because I had to buy it in order to be able to share the actual story with you today. And I got it for $3.33, which is very unusual. But I want to share the story that came to me as a result of having had that experience. It goes like this. It's called The Workers. In a far-off world, God sent two spirits to work, to tunnel. Through a mountain, they began to work. The space was too little, and their wings got interlocked. Seeing that they'd never get through the tunnel, one spirit said to the other, "You stay here, and I will go and work from the other side." It flew away, and they worked on, each from her side of the mountain. After years in the dark, each one heard the sound of the other's axe picking, and they knew that they were getting near. But before they got to the center, these spirits' sleep time came. And God sent other spirits to do and to take their work and place. But they'd heard each other's axes picking in the dark, and that was enough for each one of them. Is that not a marvelous allegory? Well, the thing that came to me as I began thinking about that allegory in 2003 and reaffirmed for me as I was coming here today, for social justice workers, if each is inspired and charged to engage in social justice work, life invites us to be what we're called to reveal. But you and I are to know that there are others spiritually inspired to engage this work as well, and to know that together we can build a hole in the mountain of oppression and unjust acts and conditions, so that as we are building that worldwide, something begins to shift. So I'm not convinced that the work that we do individually or with a small group is the whole thing. I believe, like the experience I had with Reverend Stephanie Clark, some of you may know her, in fact, because she's now living in the United States, that from her story, I began to understand that something was taking place worldwide to make a difference in the lives of oppressed people wherever they are. That is one of the key ideas that I wanted you to know. From my adventure, I came to this insight. And then I invite you to look further. Because several years later, I had an experience of an uprising to rising up. And I want to take a few moments to describe that experience. By this time, I was living and had just completed a work. It was about 2010. And I was living in Davis, California, and had just finished having a ministry there. And I was waiting to move back to the Bay Area when a ministerial student called me, and she said, "Reverend Fran," because I had been the director of education for our school of ministry many years before. And when I retired in 2004, I retired from that position. She said, "There's been an uprising at the retreat for our school of ministry. The black students are furious about some of the things that have been taking place with the School of Ministry. We want something different to happen. And would I come to our regional center where they had the School of Ministry in Santa Rosa and talk with all the students in the class. So there were people of different ethnic groups in that class, and I said I'd be willing. So she talked to the regional dean. The regional dean called me. Would I take an all-day Saturday to teach a course that we have called Teaching Adults Science of Mind? And the night before, would I meet with all the students that were on the retreat who had experienced this uprising and begin to do some healing work with them? So I said, yes, I'd be happy to do that, whatever that took. So opening myself in prayer, I showed up that Friday afternoon, and Friday evening, I met with about 25 students. First, there was a lot of complaint that took place, and then I decided the most efficient way to honor this commitment was to ask them to meet in small groups of 4 to 6 people, and that they are to list some of the things that were concerning them and things that were going well. After they did that, for about, I guess 20, 30 minutes, I then had them share and ask a group of the students, would they be part of a visioning team so that we could take what had come forth and bring it forth in terms of what the School of Ministry needed to do in order to be able to balm the spirits of those who are uprising and awaken those who had not. About 7 people were a part of that visioning team, and as a result of that, this course that is now a required course in the School of Ministry with the Centers for Spiritual Living was then called Psych 606, Diversity Issues and the Ministry. I worked with about 8 people throughout the nation, 8 ministers and 1 ministerial student, to create the curriculum for this class. And then we came upon this particular book, Readings for Diversity and Social Justice, that is one of the required textbooks for that class. The class itself, Psych 606, is the foundation for co-creating culturally sensitive spiritual community through love, freedom, and justice, in parentheses, equity. And it is said it's a required class for CSL School of Spiritual Leadership for ministerial students. That was as of 2014. That class was completed, and now it is called Psych 604, because some of my students that were in that class are teaching the class now for the School of Ministry, and they are adding additional textbooks, but this one that I have posted here, Readings for Diversity and Social Justice, is still a required class for that class. It's about this thick, cost a fortune, it's about $50, but it's one that I think is very, very stunning, and one that I'm going to quote from in a few moments. But as I move forward, I want to let you know, in addition to that work that was done, I launched the Sacred Arts and Living Center, a CSL teaching chapter that I led from 2004 to 2021. Students that are participants in that, the Practitioners Diversity Book Club that we offered from 2004 to 2021, at least 6 of them are photographed here. They were some of the students that were in that class that decided they wanted to be in the book club. And we started out by reading together Beverly Tatum, Why Do All the Black Kids Sit Together in the Cafeteria, and Other Conversations About Race. We read and discussed that book. And then afterward, we got into that big book that I was just talking about. And it took us months to go through it, because each one who is a professional practitioner, and many of them now a professional minister in the Centers for Spiritual Living, each one got to the place where they found that the book itself caused them to clench the book as if it was a part of their lives. They found themselves having tears as they read the book, felt a sense of pride and a sense of shock, because the book covers a lot of different ethnic groups, but also helps you to understand more about what are you feeling about, what are you thinking about related to some of the issues here. And then one of my friends, who was a co-minister at the Oakland Center for Spiritual Living, told me they don't seem to have anything about people who have leprosy called Hodgkin's disease right now. And she said, I think that they need to be studying that issue. And so we did. We began exploring that as part of the activity to help educate ministers and professional practitioners to understand what it's like to go out and try to lead other people in diversity issues related to social justice. I'll conclude, I think I'm about time to conclude this. While I was a co-owner of an art gallery while in the Sacramento area, I asked all the artists if they would draw something that would relate to social justice issues in the Sacramento and California area. They did that. And then we auctioned those art pieces off and gave donations to the organization that was in the area called Rwanda Organization, as well as women's shelters. We raised quite a bit of money, and I was pleased to say that we actually did work with both of those organizations to do some social justice work. I have more to share with you, but I'll pause now and wait for the questions.
Thank you. Put your hands together for Reverend Fran. So we have started hearing it's a change of heart, a change of mind, perhaps a required course that will help move our communities, our churches, to manifestation of social justice activities. Let us look at next and listen to Reverend Eileen, who was ordained as a Unity minister in 2009. Reverend Eileen began her ministerial service at Unity Church of Overland Park, serving for 4 years as the Associate Minister of Congregational Care and Ministry Programs. Following 8.5 years as Senior Minister at Unity of Traverse City, Michigan, is that right? She returned to Unity Church of Overland Park in 2021 to assume her current role as Associate Minister of Operations. Reverend Eileen served on the Board of Directors of the Unity Great Lakes region in 2020, and has been serving on the Board of Directors for the Good Faith Network, an interfaith justice organization located in Johnson County, Kansas, since 2022. In the fall of 2023, she was elected to serve as a member at large on the executive board of the network. Prior to Unity Ministry and while living in Houston, Texas, Eileen enjoyed a successful 28-year career in the commercial insurance and risk management, with her final position being that of Vice President of Risk Management and Training and Development. Oh, set you up good for for the Lockton Companies headquartered in Kansas City, Missouri. She has 2 adult sons who continue to make their homes in Houston. And they and her daughters-in-law have blessed her with 7 beautiful grandchildren. 7, that's good. There, Reverend Eileen, put your hands together.
Well, thank you, and good morning to everybody. I am really honored and very grateful to be a part of this conference and to be a part of this particular panel on social justice. I consider myself to be relatively new to this work. When I first felt called to get involved in it in some way, it was 2020. And it would be 2 more years before I found a clear first step that I could take. There was a course in anti-racism being offered by an organization which at that time operated under the name of the Anti-Racism Institute, based out of San Diego, California. It grew out of work begun at the Unity Center in San Diego, but it very soon became a separate and its own operating entity, and it drew participants from throughout the country. There was a requirement in the course when it ended, and it was to submit an outline for a project that would be very specific to anti-racism that I would then implement so as to put into action what I had learned during my time in the course, and to continue with other people the conversations I had begun with my classmates at that time. And so the project I chose was to create a curriculum based on the course without infringing upon the Institute's copyrighted material, and bring it home and offer it to my spiritual community here in Overland Park, Kansas. And as you can see on the slide, the ultimate course, the overriding goal of the course is focusing on a white person's role in terms of becoming an ally for the Black community. And from there, the objectives became to increase that white person's scope of racial awareness, of racial literacy, and also racial action. And so I'd like to kind of break that down a little bit more for you. And every time I've offered the course, invariably one of the first questions I get asked is, why only white people? Why are only white people being invited to this particular curriculum? And I learned the answer to that question within 10 minutes of the first day of the course I took with the Institute, and that is, it is for white people only because we don't know what we don't know about this topic. It took 10 minutes for me to realize, and it was a painful realization, that I did not know what I did not know about this work that I had stepped into. You see, when the Unity Center in San Diego began their work on anti-racism, they invited their entire congregation to come together, sit in circle, and have conversations. So they invited the Black community, they invited the white community, the other people of color, other persons of color community, and sat down and started to talk. And only after a few sessions, the Black community went to the minister and said, please meet with your white people first. They said, otherwise, this is never going to work. You need to talk with them first, and then we can all come back together. And that's really what was the impetus behind the Anti-Racism Institute beginning, and this course being the first one that it offered. You see, the white folks, they needed to learn, they needed to discuss, they needed to debate, they needed to just question amongst themselves. They needed to become more informed about racism itself, about its roots, about its pervasiveness, its pervasive presence in systems throughout our country and the world, and most importantly, perhaps, to learn about their own biases, to learn about their own prejudices, to learn about their own racial tendencies, whether they were intentional or unintentional. And see, these things, they're not, they could be, but they're really not for the Black community to teach us white folks. I mean, the truth is, they've been trying to teach us for centuries. And there's a whole lot of us out here that haven't really been listening very well. And so in this class, we do take a look at issues like implicit bias and cultural appropriation, the history of racism, white privilege and white fragility, interracial families, and the other isms within this race, like individual racism, systemic racism, internalized racism. And so I thought I would share a few of the experiences that I've had to date that speak to some of it's a wide spectrum of responses and reactions that were presented by those who have attended. And I'd like to give you some context as well around that. Our church right now currently has a weekly attendance combined both in person and online that can range somewhere between 85 and 100 on any given week. We've offered the class now for 2 years, and over that time we've had 6 small group cohorts come together. In total, in those 6 groups, we've had 46 unique attendees. So that's about 50% of our congregation has stepped into the class. Of those 46, 42 were white women and 4 were white men. So as we move through the topics of each week, there really was a very wide spectrum of responses, reactions, and a lot of emotions, coming forth. On the one hand, I don't believe I had one week 1 week where there weren't tears being shed. There were a lot of feelings of guilt and shame that arose for people in the class. There was anger and embarrassment at what they didn't know, that they were now finding out that they didn't know, which then for some took them to deeper levels of anger towards their upbringing, towards their educational system, toward their family systems, and so forth. And sometimes there was a lot of resistance, some resistance just to accepting the fact that racism is still really a thing, that is still out there, and also resistance to being willing to open up and examine where it might exist within the person themselves. On the other side of that spectrum, there was immense vulnerability being shown as people started to own their historical story as a white person. There began to be constant motivation to learn more, to do more, and to be more as they were finding their way, hopefully, towards a path of further advocacy on this topic. There was also a groundswell of activity from 1 week to the next where folks were going out and they were researching on their own things like, where are the minority businesses that I can go to? Where are Black churches that I can maybe see a difference between Unity Church of Overland Park, which is predominantly white, versus a Black church community. They were finding resources in addition to what the curriculum and the course were offering. They were stepping out of what had been very comfortable zones for them. They were stepping out and trying to have what could be, and for many ended up being, very difficult and uncomfortable conversations with family members, some being spouses or partners, with their friends they've known for years, and also their co-workers. And then some would step out and they would just try to find someone in a black person, because many of us did not have many Black people in our immediate circles. And so one went to their bank and they saw the bank manager was Black. And they just said, I just went up and said hi, just to try to start a conversation. They started to go to their grocery stores or department stores, and they'd look at the checkout lines and look for a black clerk or a Black associate for the store. Some just crossed over their yard or across the street to introduce themselves for the first time to the family, who was a Black family they had not spoken to before. The class, it truly lives up to the title of its primary reference book, which is Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man. It's written by Emmanuel Acho. It can be very uncomfortable. In fact, I would say that if there is not a palpable discomfort in the room, the class is probably not meeting its goal. But in the end, across that wide spectrum and everything that could fall in between, it's been one of the most powerful and impactful experiences I have ever had. I mean, like I said, when I opened, I am relatively new to this. I am not an expert by any means. Many times those in the class were teaching me, and it was wonderful. And it was, without fail, week after week, an experience of stepping into a very sacred container that we had made together, we created together on the first session, where people then felt safe to come back and keep coming back and continue to be more open, more vulnerable, more authentic, more brutally honest at times, knowing that they were not in a place where they would be judged or they would be blamed, but rather it was a place where love was the constant. And it was love that was for all in the room because it was coming from all in the room. So next, I wanted to give you an outline of some of the logistics of the course as we've created it, because I believe it is very easily replicated, or could be, in your communities or your organizations if you wanted to do so. You just add your flavor to it, your twist to it. So as you can see, an ideal number for the group is 8 plus a facilitator. An ideal is attached to the idea that it's very important that everyone in the group shares, speaks out loud, really participates in the class. And that when you have 7 sessions and there's 90 minutes allotted to each one, anything more than 8 can make it quite challenging for every voice to be heard while also honoring the time commitment everyone has made. And I've experienced both. I've had cohorts where there was maybe 5 people or 6 people. I had 1 out of the 6 where there was 10. The smaller group, we still filled every minute of those 90 in conversation. But with the 10, it was very difficult to do so, and not everyone did have the equal opportunity to share. So I really do recommend that you consider capping it at 8 if you can. Now, our church community has a very active online presence, and we also have several members in our community who are deaf. And so it was very important to us that we make the class available for everyone and accessible to everyone, meaning that no matter who you were going to be able to get the full experience that everybody else was getting as well. And so we always had a Zoom option available. Sometimes we had just a Zoom class. Most times it was a hybrid, some in person, some online. And then for the deaf community who wanted to attend, we always made sure that there was ASL interpretation available for them. And then the last point there shows some of the support materials. I mentioned the book by Emmanuel Acho. There are selected videos from Mr. Acho as well that deal with this particular topic, as well as videos from other topical experts. Some are for in-class viewing together as a group. Others are more for the homework assignments. So they do it on their own and then come back and we discuss it the next week. And then we've created templates for a class syllabus, for the weekly lessons with some suggested topics and timing around each of those. We did start out with suggested heart agreements when we created that safe container. And then I've just continued to compile a document from all of the research that all the class people went out and found, and I just keep adding to it. And so there's a laundry list of got to be hundreds of resources right now in addition to what the book provides. And we're happy when Reverend Jacquie speaks in a few minutes here. She's going to give you some information as far as how you can access that easily if you would like to check that out. Last one. And so this last slide has a quote on it, and it says, it fosters truth-telling, first to self and then to others. And it's from a fabulous book that I really wish I had known of 2 years ago when I first started out to create and offer this class. So the book is titled Been in the Struggle, and it's written by Regina Shan Stoltzfus and Tobin Miller Shearer. Oh, it's a wonderful, honest, very educational read from its 2 authors, and it is a Black woman and a white man. And it tells their story of their partnership and their work that is now over 3 decades long and counting, of continuing to pursue not only anti-racism work, but an anti-racist spirituality. The work can be hard, and it is very, very uncomfortable much of the time. And so as such, it was important to not forget the foundation upon which we are standing as we do this work. And that's the foundation of spiritual truths, of spiritual principles that are unchanging, are unwavering, and always there to support us. We just got to invite them to the party, right? So I'd like to close by sharing the totality of the quote about anti-racist spirituality. It is the definition of that as the 2 authors have found it to be for them. It is a way of being in the world that draws on the unknown and unknowable, which some call spirit, others name the divine, goes by the word mystery, relates to us as God, to encourage, empower, and enthuse amid the intention and the action to undermine systems of white supremacy around us. It fosters truth-telling, first to self, then to others. It lifts up communal efforts, is not afraid of hard conversation, and invites laughter, joy, and human connection. And anti-racist spirituality encourages awareness of limitation while inviting all that has not yet been conceived, gestated, or birthed to move into the possible and be fully realized. It is strong. It does not demand perfection. It does not easily crumble. So as you choose to enter into this work or continue the work you've already begun, yes, your eyes, our eyes get open to many things that are hard and challenging and difficult and frustrating and angering and so forth. But please don't close your eyes to the laughter and to the human connections that are made and the joy, because they are some of the greatest gifts that will come your way. It's been my joy to be with all of you this morning, and I thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. It is, everybody, I want to mention, I should have done it at the very top, there will be time for questions, for you to ask these folks questions if you want to take back to your community. And, oh, anti-racist spirituality. I mean, we could start a whole new thing across these United States, a new thought and outside of new thought with that. Thank you so much, Rev. Thank you. Next, we have Reverend Jacquie Fernandez. Is that correct? She is a senior minister at Unity Church of Overland Park and is an international award-winning writer and filmmaker and regular columnist for Spirituality and Health magazine. She recently established Foi with Faith, an LGBTQ+ organization that gathers for spiritual discussion and provides a chapter system for New Thought centers. Reverend Jacquie facilitates monthly DEI JB support calls for Unity leaders as an expression of her passion to create spaces of empowerment and healing. She is delighted to share the journey and work, and we are delighted to have her, of anti-racism happening with the leaders and congregants of Unity of Church of Overland Park as a fulfillment of our mission to transform lives and empower people to make a difference in this world. This is Reverend Jacquie.
Thank you. It's really great to be here with you this morning, and thank you so much. This is my partner in ministry, and I am so proud of the work that she has done. And what she didn't share with you is after she attended the Anti-Racism Institute classes and study that she did and came to me with this project that she wanted to bring as her homework assignment to UCOP, her inner monologue was, what will I need to say so that she doesn't do it and lets me do it? And when she made the request and had laid it all out for me, what I said was, absolutely, let's get it on the calendar. And my inner monologue was, thank you, God, I don't have to do it. Because she is white and I am Latinx. And as a person of color, when it comes to the topic of anti-racism or racism, I am always in the middle. My life experience is I am not black, I am not white. And I can be as white as you want me to be, and I can be as black as you want me to be. So I'm always subject to other people's perception of the depth of my color. So it makes it very challenging then as a leader to have these conversations, knowing that my predominantly white congregation might get very uncomfortable with who is she to tell us about this, or pity me as I share my life experience, or get very defensive and tell me that doesn't belong on the platform. Now, I bring it on Sundays, but I dress it up, and I am kind, and I am gentle, and I have just now, I will be completing my 4th year at UCOP, and so in the first few years, I wanted to take a step back, because what I had heard is on my resume, I had listed that I was on the Black and Brown Coalition of Kansas City, which is under the direction of Congressman Cleaver, Emmanuel Cleaver, and some people, when I was hired, thought that was really awesome. Other people thought that was very dangerous and thought that maybe I didn't belong there because I was an activist. And so I wanted to tone that down and give time to build trust And then here comes this lady and just going for it. And so she was able to do and have the conversations in the white-only groups that I could not have the conversation. Eventually, we did require all staff to do it. And then Lisa Benson, who I'll talk about later, who's a Black woman who is a consultant for DEI conversations, also attended with us. So we had 2 people of color in the room, and I think it did change the experience of the group and the conversation. So it was important to protect that white space because I know some of the things that were spoken in that space would not have been said in front of me. And I can say this, or if they had, we would have had some healing work to do. and it's not for me. Like, that is part of the process, and we needed to create that safe space. Because what I have heard from white people is that sometimes, many times, in those spaces where we talk about racism, even in spiritual context, they don't feel safe. So we want people to feel safe enough to do the work. It requires vulnerability. It requires authenticity. It requires the willingness to say things you don't even want to say. Because if you don't say it out loud, you can't face it. And then you can't heal it, and you can't learn from it, and you can't embrace that awareness. And all of our teachings hang on the point of awareness. So you may recognize the woman in the photo with me, iconic civil rights activist Dolores Huerta. She is my great aunt. She was best friends with my maternal grandmother all growing up, and my grandmother married her brother. And so I knew Si Se Puede, Viva la Raza, Viva la Huelga, all of the chants in the rallies before I knew my alphabet growing up. My family didn't have football season. We had campaign season. So this was my life growing up. I was taken to more rallies than I ever wanted to go to. But I also got to meet a lot of leaders. I met Geraldine Ferraro when she ran with Walter Mondale. I met all of these people, and you know, when you grow up like that, you don't have the appreciation because it's just what you know, and you think everybody lives this way. So I'm going to share with you a story, and this took place in 2018. Dolores comes to Kansas City quite often. Every few years, some group or another or university brings her. And so in 2018, she came, and I was called to be her handler because she needs to be handled. In 2018, she was 88. She just turned 94 this year. She was 88, and I am telling you, me and my 2 at the time, high school and junior high children were worn out by the end of the night. We picked her up from the airport at 7:30 in the morning. We met Congressman Cleaver for breakfast. They had never met before, but he had contacted me and requested to have breakfast with her. And what I learned over the course of that breakfast, which he brought his assistant, and we just ate and listened, and our minds were blown at the level of conversation these 2 people had. But what she learned and didn't know is that she, in the 60s, had helped get his wrongfully accused Black uncle out of jail. And he wanted to take her to breakfast to say thank you. Yeah, it was amazing. And then we were off to the next thing, and then the next thing, and she wanted to stop here, there, and there. She was actually in town to attend an event. She was the key presenter at the university, or Kansas State University, which is in Manhattan, and that's a 3-hour drive away. On the 3-hour drive, I'm thinking, oh, good, I'll be able to put some music on and relax. Maybe she'll sleep. No, she was on the phone because she was talking to PBS. At that time, her documentary had just come out, and PBS was developing a curriculum for kids, so she was giving edits for that. And then she was talking to her attorneys because the Dolores Huerta Foundation had sued the Bakersfield School District to address the prison to the pipeline, right? School to prison pipeline. And so they were about to make a decision, so she was working through the final issues with on and on and on, and then her assistant back in the office and her staff was having a meeting, and 3 hours later, I am wiped out, and she is still going, because now we have a meet and greet with a group of Latinx students who had brought her to the university, and she was like, come on. I'm thinking, oh, good, I'll wait in the car. No, come on. So she was supposed to meet and greet for 15 minutes. An hour and a half later, we left for dinner and to check into the hotel. And so now we picked her up at 7:30 in the morning, and now we're talking about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. She's like, I'm going to take a nap. I'm like, oh, great. Well, we had 15 minutes before we needed to get back for the presentation. She goes and takes her power nap. We get back in the car. Our driver picks us up. And I realize as we're on our way over that we are actually, the event is starting. We're only 5 minutes away, but the event is starting now. And so she says to me, so I would like you to speak with me. And here's what we're going to do. So she didn't take a nap in her room. She created an assignment, and she was like, I'd like you to speak with me, and what we're going to do is we're going to talk about courage and faith. You talk about faith, I'll talk about courage, and so does that sound good? And I was like, great, so what are you going to... I'm ready to take notes. And, you know, she rattles a few things off. We're there. We're walking into the building, into the backstage area. And then she's like, yeah, just talk about being a queer woman, a mother in Kansas, and, you know, and faith, and a minister, and, you know, and that, and it'll be fine. So they're miking us up. They're adding a chair to the stage. They're already introducing us because the event had already started. And so they're getting notes to add my sort of bio or whatever to the, and I hear, and welcome to the stage, Dolores Huerta and Reverend Jacquie Fernandez, and she turns around, and I'm ready for my blessing. Let's do this. You've got this. And that's what she communicated, but the words were, you go first. So we walk out, and we sit down, and we're in. And I want to tell you that there's a reason I'm telling you that specific story. One was it was a pivotal moment in my life because I was not walking on that stage as the niece of Dolores Huerta. This was not my niece who always makes sure you have sunscreen on at the family reunions, that she's not, you know, always making sure you know who's on the ballot and what issues we're working on, and, you know, wiping your face and making sure you're eating more tamales. You know, it was not her. It was the icon, Dolores Huerta, and I was taking the platform. And then to be able to talk about faith in front of university students and professors, in front of that audience, there were probably 1,000 people there, in the context of civil rights with Dolores Huerta, changed everything for me, because up until that point in ministry, I had converted myself from an activist to minister. And now our teachings, which have this beautiful tension, unity principles, the fourth principle to the fifth principle, has this beautiful tension, living the truth we know. We must, like you said at the beginning, demonstrate. It's not enough to say we are love, peace, and joy, and we welcome everyone here. No, you do not. I can tell you, we do not welcome everyone here. That's the truth. That is the truth. And if we can't say it, then we cannot be collectively aware of it, and then we cannot change it. And what that experience did for me, I had done the conversion of, now I'm not an activist, now I'm a minister, and we're just going to pray, and, you know, we might say things here, but okay. So I was on staff at Unity Worldwide Ministries, and I was in charge of social media, and the first time when the thing happened in Texas, and I put hashtag Black Lives Matter on a Friday, I got a phone call from my boss, take it down. Okay, so I was pushing and pushing and pushing, but getting the pushback. What changed for me after that experience on that platform was now, wait a minute, the civil rights movement welcomes the faith conversation. Do you see what I'm saying? This was a university context wanting to have the civil rights icon, Dolores Huerta, come and talk to them about how to advocate, how to rally, how to organize. And she brought faith into the conversation, faith and courage. So let's flip the script in our spiritual context and spiritual environment. Why not then can't we bring how to advocate, how to rally, how to organize, how to, from principle, live the truth we know? So now I still am careful and mindful and invite wisdom in, and I want to be gentle for those who need a gentleness, because if we can't get to first base, we will never get to second, we will never hit the home run, right? So we need to be gentle and mindful. but also direct and create space that is safe and risky, right, to do the work. And Eileen did a beautiful, beautiful job, and we're still doing that work. So I'm going to share more of that with you and really talk about the impact and outcomes of what she created over those 2 years. I'm going to talk to you about prayer to action, folks with faith, and DEIJB conversations. So what we did was, after the 2 years had been complete, the staff was the last group to go through the 7-week study, and we did that right before the holidays hit. It was, but we had to do it. You had to get it on the calendar. Because then in January of this year, we then took it to the pulpit, and we created a series called Healing Humanity, Spiritual Oneness and Inclusiveness. How many of you at your spiritual centers have one of your core values as something like inclusivity or diversity or oneness? Okay. So, reflection, awareness, action. None of these words are provocative, right? This is what we do. But the topic behind this that we wove in was the anti-racism work, healing humanity. So if we come from our spiritual principle, then we get permission to bring it to the table. But if we come in with, we're going to do anti-racism, and and all of the defenses go up, and then people, well, I've done my work. Well, I have a black friend. I'm not pointing to you because you said that. I want to share something that was said. A revelation that came out of the group as a white congregant said, so-and-so, who's a black congregant, we've been here at this church together for decades. We have lunch, and we have never talked about race. Right? So we're cultivating that awareness. So we did this 3-week series, reflection, awareness, action. And then we brought Lisa Benson in. So do you see how we tilled the ground? Eileen tilled the ground of bringing awareness, of creating safe space. Like, let's figure out what we don't know that we don't know. Let's increase cultural competency. Then we unleashed Lisa Benson. And she was fantastic. If you don't know who she is, look her up. She has a fabulous story. She's a award-winning, Emmy award-winning journalist who ended up having to sue the news station she worked for discrimination. She would not get promoted. Would not. Year after year after year was getting passed on promotions. And in that process, she learned that she's black. She grew up not realizing her own blackness, and it did not occur to her for years until someone else said, it's because you're black. And so it was this whole work for her. Now she is a consultant for DEI and anti-racism, and she did a Sunday talk, and then she did a workshop. So this was the very first time that we had a mixed experience for our community. So it was everyone is welcome to come. And we let her, not the staff ministers do it, but we let a guest come in and do that work. And they knew that she had been through the study with Emmanuel Acho's book with the staff. So again, we want to keep building that trust, cultivating the trust as we bring people in. We started bringing BIPOC, if you aren't familiar with that, is Black, Indigenous, People of Color, perspectives in. And that was the very first experience of that was with Lisa Benson. But then also, Reverend Eileen and I met with our congregants of color. We invited everyone, congregants of color, and then those who wanted to come. And we, shared, did we do lunch? No, we didn't. We had food before, and then we did conversation. But this was a listening session for us. They knew that we had been doing this study group, and so Eileen shared a little bit more about what happened in the study group, what that was like. And then other than that, it was like, what is your experience here in this community? Most of them had been there for a very long time, had been part of the church for much longer than I have. And what is your experience here? And it was very positive. There was nothing uncomfortable for me that happened in that conversation. And I was really kind of hoping that somebody would say, well, this is what I experienced that made me uncomfortable. But I think because that conversation happened after 2 years, that they knew for 2 years we'd been doing the work, there was just so much gratitude expressed that we were willing to do it, and talking about how much it's needed, and talking about how they felt the benefit of that, and being so proud to be in a spiritual community that's doing that work. Our next, we're not done. So again, this is a process that's happening. We call it chapters. And right now we have this sort of, the first chapter was laid out through the Anti-Racism Institute, and now we're just kind of making it up as we go and feeling into the call of spirit, feeling into our community and how it is being shaped. I will say that our community is a lot more active now because in their awareness, they need a place to demonstrate. And so it was mentioned that Reverend Eileen serves on the board of Good Faith Network. That is a group locally, and there are many kinds of their groups with different names around the nation. But this particular group is made up of local churches, and I think there are 24 now, 29 in our county. And the work is through listening circles of the congregations, they gather what issues are important for the community. So for the last 2 years, we've been working on, and help me out, addressing the lack of affordable housing in our county, ending homelessness, not managing homelessness, but ending homelessness. We are in like the 5th most wealthy county in the nation, and we have like 142 people that are unhoused. We've got the resources to end that issue. Okay, so there's that, and then what's the third? Yes, establishing a mental health crisis stabilization center. So right now, there is not one in our county. The 5th wealthiest nation in the county ships off. Either you go to the ER and spend hours or days there, or you go to jail, or you get shipped off to the next county, which is underfunded, under-resourced, and you go to one of their units if you can get a bed there. These are problems. So as people of faith, of all denominations, 29, did I say that right? 29 different churches are coming together, and what we do is we do the work, the research, and so our congregations are involved in doing this work. They make it so good for the ministers. They don't expect a lot from us. It's really about getting our congregants to be lay leaders in this regard. And because you can research, you can educate, you can do lots of different kinds of activities. It's welcoming for elder participants. They just want to be at home and make phone calls. They can do that kind of work. So there's a variety of ways that you can serve in this capacity. But what we do is we create then an action plan to solve these issues, research-based. And then we, at the end of the season, we have what's called a Nehemiah event, and all of the congregations, and this year it was 1,500 people from the congregations gathered, and address and present the requests to the county commissioners. Yeah. Our faith compels us to action. And we make those requests, and then we hold them, their feet to the fire, and that's what they do on the board. They go to the county commission meetings. So if you dial the clock back, or if you were to start a conversation with your congregation about, hey, we're going to address the county commission, but you can't do it that way. But if you start with our faith compels us to, what our families and our congregations, what issues are important to them, and how can our faith work to address these issues right here in our community. And now you have a bunch of activists in your church who don't even realize that's what they're doing, but they're doing it and their heart is in it and they understand why. So we keep putting the why in front of them. Our next step in this, am I good on time? Our next step is Reverend Sandra Campbell, who's here in the room. So our next step, when we want to get into that deeper conversation, so Lisa came and presented a workshop, but now we want to get into a deeper conversation, a courageous conversation that is mixed, right? So white, people of color, everyone in the room. And our perspective, and I'm speaking because we've talked about this a lot, our perspective is it needs to be a ministerial presence leading that, and it needs to be not us, and it needs to be a Black woman. And Sandra said yes. So she will be coming later this year to meet with our congregation and to take us through a courageous conversations process. And now what happens in that process is people learn how to share that conversation, how to be uncomfortable in front of each other, how to step in it in front of each other and not go into white fragility, not go into shame and blame, not go into, well, see, there you go again, black anger, right? Not to go into any of that, but like sit in it and be with it and let that energy move so that we can heal it. And if we can do that, you can do that. And if we can do that, we start to shift the culture at large, right? We take it into the world. Demonstration. We cultivate empathy. We open hearts. We build competency. And to me, that is the most important key thing to do to really make real change. And we demonstrate integrity, again, to our core values that we say. That is radical oneness, right? How am I on time? I am over time. Oh, okay. I'm going to go through my next 15 slides. Folks with Faith, this is on the website, but I'm going to give you 3 QR codes, okay, so that you can get more information. Folks with Faith is our LGBTQ ministry, and you can chapter with us, and we give you all the resources that you need. Our website is packed with resources. You don't even have to write programming, so if you want to get a queer-centric group together in your community, contact us. This is the QR code for that, and you add yourself to the contact list. The website is folks, F-O-L-X, with faith.org. We have a retreat. We partner with Unity World Headquarters, and we have a retreat here at Unity Village. Last year, we had the first ever drag show at Unity Village. This year, we'll have the second. All right, everyone got that QR code? Who wants it? All right. And then DEIJB Conversations. It's a support call offered through the Unity South Central region that I facilitate. You are welcome. Everyone is welcome to join that. Leaders, ministers, lay leaders. These are some of the topics that we've already covered. They are all recorded and on the website, and I'm going to give you a QR code for that. We'll be taking August off because I'll be on sabbatical, but we'll be right back there. So that'll give you time to catch up on what's been recorded. The format is second Thursday is recorded. We give information. The fourth Thursday, not recorded, and we talk about it. So get that QR code. And then here's the final one. And this is if you want some of the resources that Reverend Eileen talked about for the anti-racist curriculum, prayer to action, which I didn't get to talk about or anything else, just get on our contact list here, take that QR code, and we will send you a link to our webpage for all of the goodies. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Jacquie. Thank you. So, and make sure you're writing questions down if you have some at the very end. But it no longer is a New Thought metaphysician or an activist. It's a New Thought metaphysician and an activist. That's what we do with the principles that we use to take them outside of the church or the center walls. And our final presenter, who I'm really excited about, Reverend Carolyn Wilkins. She is the founding minister and spiritual director of Inspirational Ministries, a virtual New Thought spiritual community, and founder of Inspirational Consulting, a personal development consulting company. For 20 years, Reverend Wilkins has been a featured speaker, educator, youth advisor, and workshop leader on nonviolence, inclusivity, social justice, and ethical and spiritual leadership for organizations and global conferences. She has been a managing director and marketing lead for global conferences for Agape and the Oprah Winfrey Network, a convener, marketing lead for global conferences, I said that, blah, 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 for youth and adults. I'm going to pick this up and read it correctly. The impact of her work on international humanitarian projects have reached lives in America, Canada, Europe, Brazil, India, Senegal, Ghana, Egypt, and South Africa. Reverend Wilkins managed clergy engagement for NM Cafe in southern New Mexico for 5 years. She leads an interfaith effort to bring resources to the unhoused in Las Cruces, and has been an advocate for affordable housing, much, much more. I want to read this. So Reverend Carolyn is a 2019 graduate of the Racial Equity and Healing Justice Training Program, a 6-month certification facilitated by California Conference of Equality and Justice. And she's a 2018 graduate of Truth, TRHT-LA, that is Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation Training, designed to promote racial healing in the world, sponsored by the Kellogg Foundation. She has incorporated teachings of diversity, inclusivity, justice into all of her programs. She's got lots and lots of degrees, but I do want to mention one of them. Wilkins earned a MBA in management, a master's degree program in transformational leadership, and completed doctoral studies in ministry and spirituality. Take a deep breath. Take a deep breath. Shake it, shake it, shake it so you'll wake up. And though I don't know how anybody could have been asleep with this wonderful information. Nobody. But now we're going to have the Reverend Carolyn Wilkins take us to that next level of information. Thank you.
I guess I have to sit down. Okay. Yeah, because they get you singing, right? Yes. Use your microphone.
Use your mic, they can't hear you.
I will. Peace. We're going to begin with peace. Let it begin with me. I appreciate all of those who are on this panel. And I'm quite in awe, really, of your work. We just learned about each other a couple of weeks ago, and I'm inspired and touched knowing that there's such a commitment at different levels. I've known Reverend Fancione for many, many, many years, and I'm newly acquainted with these two powerful ministers. So it's really a pleasure to be on this panel and a pain at the same time, because we're talking about things that I feel after all these years I shouldn't have to be talking about. I'm going to tell a little bit of the truth. I don't want it to be painful, but it may be. And at the same time, the experiences that I've had the opportunity to participate in have helped me to build a vision, a heart, and a willingness to include other people in where I know we can go. You know, the work that we do as ministers, as leaders in New Thought, we often start with mind, but the thing that I found over all of these years of almost 40 years being involved in New Thought is if you don't go to heart, nothing will happen. Nothing will happen. I'm not going to go through my bio so much as to just say that I've been involved. One of the most wonderful positions I've had is director of the Global Works Ministry for Agape International Spiritual Center, which we do outreach around the world and work with humanitarian organizations, helping them do their work wherever they are, whether it's planting trees or having fish farms in Uganda or bird rescue in Brazil. There are things around the world that we get to support, including sending money to Standing Rock and programs that help the indigenous and other people. So it's really been an honor to be a part of that. I have been in Las Cruces, New Mexico. I won't try to explain that in this conversation because I ask every morning, how did I get here? From Culver City, 3 miles, 8 minutes from the ocean, to Las Cruces, I have a beautiful view of the mountain, but it's 1,000 miles to water. So I'll just say God works in mysterious ways by taking us to different places. I want to go through a couple of things that we've been involved in that I know you all know about, and perhaps it'll spur something because maybe you're not involved. But the Association for Global New Thought created a program called the Season for Nonviolence, I think about 40 years ago. And the initial gathering was to honor the death of Gandhi. They used the two dates, the death of Gandhi and the death of Dr. King, I'm sorry, the birth of Dr. King. And so they wound up doing January 30th through April the 4th. And it winds up being about 90 days of work together. And they put those together. Reverend Michael was on the committee to get that started many years ago. I stepped into a space of being a part of the Season for Nonviolence for many years. And we have done meditations, we've done programs, we've done interfaith programs within Culver City, Los Angeles, and many states. We've taken it to the Parliament of World Religions. We've shared it with other places, and it's around the world in many countries. Some of the original people involved were people that were out of Agape, who wrote some of the books, if some of you have them in your churches, that there are guidelines for what to do for 64 days, there are meditations, and it continues to rise because people continue to give different input. But it's a program that I have found so important. And my work has been in social justice and out in the world. I didn't talk about my work in the corporate world. I worked for Xerox for over 20 years. My degree is in computer science and operations research, so I'm a nerd and a minister. And the challenge was there weren't very many Black people in Xerox, especially in technology and marketing and sales. And one of my initial groups to join was an organization that Xerox created for Black leaders. They actually are written up in a Harvard Business Review because they were the first caucus group in a corporate world creating a social justice action. And they wound up with organizations in every city that Xerox was in. The result of their work created a Black president at Xerox. And I got to participate in the creation of a Black Women's Leadership Council because they had a Black Men's Leadership Council that helped each other, and they forgot about us. And as women would do, we didn't stand on the side and say, why not? We pushed them out the way and created our own program. And as a result, Ursula Burns became the first Black female president of a corporation in the United States. So I bring this up because the work of equality, the work of opening hearts and making space has been something I've been doing a long time. I didn't call it social justice. When I was at work, I was just trying to get another job, as everybody else, because we were all smart and talented and knew what we could do. but this glass ceiling didn't allow us to take the next step. I'm going to step into this conversation about the Season for Nonviolence, and it was a beautiful, it still is, it's been ongoing, looking at the Gandhi, King, Chavez basic principles. I don't have time to read them all, but I know you know that there's a website, Association for Global New Thought. If you're not aware of it, it's got all of the pieces on there. But my life has been dedicated to nonviolence. After finding out about the organization many years ago, 30 years ago, because it's the way I approached the world, meaning to honor the inherent worth of every human being. In nonviolence, we naturally seek to understand each other, build friendship and community, and then there are other things that go with it. But most people don't understand nonviolence, and it has to be taught. And what I have seen in the world in the last 10 years or so, and we're starting to see the rhetoric around presidential campaigns and other things, it's a division instead of a coming together of our world. There's no greater time for our consciousness to make an impact than now. There's no greater time for you individually to pray for us coming together. And there's no greater time than you taking active involvement in things that we may not have learned in ministerial school. I say it that way because there was no conversation in the classes that I took. In addition to the Season for Nonviolence, talking about great leaders, and their 6 major ones included Gandhi, Dr. King, Cesar Chavez, Dolores Huerta, and Nelson Mandela. Those were the ones that we focused on. I also started adding some other things as we were going through the season. And we looked at women of civil rights. Did a whole series in the city helping people understand that behind, the figures who were in front were the names that everybody knew. But a lot of people didn't know these other folks. Of course, we knew Coretta Scott King. She was a beautiful woman. And the person who supposedly sat on a bus and got up, that wasn't what she did. And by the way, she was an amazing organizer. She was part of the strategy. She wasn't just a young girl who was told what to do. She was one of the strategists involved. And then there are other names which I can share at another time. We also included music of the civil rights because Dr. King was a strategist. Behind him was James Lawson, who helped to teach nonviolence around the world. And they included, there's a picture here of the Pipettes, I believe is what their names were. And they always had music at rallies. Dr. King recognized the power of music in bringing people together. So there was no rally I ever went to that we didn't start off with a song. But that's very similar to what the Black church does. In fact, it was probably the biggest shift of stepping into New Thought versus being in a Baptist church. Because New Thought churches, I won't label all of you, but many that I've been in, music is secondary, maybe tertiary to the experience. something is coming through me right now, and I don't think I've ever even said it like this. I know because of the pain that Black people have had in this country, from slavery to domestic work to driving cars and cleaning up trash. The place they were able to express themselves was church. Even during slavery, they were allowed to have their space, which is why the music is so emotional. Sometimes the music was uncomfortable when I've invited friends or when my white friends and organizers and neighbors came. They kind of looked at me like, Rev, what, where am I? I don't understand all this clapping and shouting and everything else. But it's the expression of spirit that had to come through, because it couldn't come through in regular work. There are times I wanted to shout when I was at Xerox because something moved me. And we were allowed to express our feelings. But I learned in the corporate world, well, I learned before I got there, but you had to compartmentalize yourself. Have you ever thought of that? You couldn't bring your whole self in. And it's part of the challenge we all have still. You don't have your whole self in. I'm going to move through some of the other things we've done quickly. At Agape, we worked in community with things like Peace Sunday, where we brought people together for the Season for Nonviolence. I've been involved in social justice programs of peer mediation, which is teaching nonviolence and how to control your thinking in schools. A whole program in schools that was started by someone, and there was a whole league of us that chose a school, a high school, elementary school, to teach principles of nonviolence and breathing. Because unfortunately, in Los Angeles, where I was, there's a mix. There were blacks, whites, Hispanics. The black youth were suspended at a higher rate than anybody else. It's probably not a surprise to some of you, and maybe it is to others. But the reason is because when they got angry or upset, they would be set aside and then suspended if it happened again. Early in their childhood, they were set aside and punished for articulating what they may have been thinking. Where in other schools and with other youth, they didn't necessarily need to have that issue. And teachers responded differently, because when a young black man got upset, they get scared versus another child. The long and short of this is we taught thousands of young people in school nonviolent behavior, how to breathe, and how to mediate issues amongst themselves. So that's what the peer mediation was. If you had a problem with another child, you go find somebody who had come through our program, and they'd be a mediator for you to have a solution. And I worked with Avis Ridley Thomas and a whole team for over 10 years, and we work with thousands of youth, keeping them out of the system, keeping them out of being suspended, keeping them out of jail, because they learn how to respond without anger. We also had healing circles who were part of it's an organization that's out of India called the Art of Living, Sri Sri Ravi Shankar. And they teach all over the world breathing techniques. And there are programs that have been managed through schools where there's someone assigned to a school for the whole year, and different, it's mostly junior high and high school, and the same outcome, trying to teach young people. They have a whole period where they learn different techniques. They talk about how to react and how to respond and how to have fun, and to turn anger into something actionable. So these are the kind of social justice programs I've been involved in, a lot around youth, because if we can't save our youth, we've lost them before they become adults. And most of you know that the jail system is filled with black and brown people. It's not black and brown people who do all the crimes, but that's who's in jail. And if you haven't been to jail, my young lady who I've kind of adopted wondered, why do you go to jail? I don't understand. Why would you spend time in jail and you don't even know the people? But it's to share these teachings and to give them hope, and I don't know if any of you have had those kind of ministries. But the other thing is I talked about the peer mediation. And the next thing we did was healing conversations. When George Floyd was killed 4 years ago, it changed things for a lot of people. We were also in the middle of COVID. And the organization Art of Living had a group of black people that came together, and we decided we would do an online program called Breathe With Me. And we sent notices out. They had things through each of the centers around the country, and they also had notices online. We wound up having anywhere from 20 to 40 to 100 people on a Zoom call every week, different people every time from around the world. They were black people who we got to talk about what's happening, because the black community was affected even more than anybody else when COVID happened. More black people worked in jobs that they were exposed to COVID in more ways. And so I want to leave with you just opening your heart to understanding that the generation of young black youth today, many of them have lost their grandmothers, their aunts, their great-grands, because a higher majority of black elders died during COVID than other groups. So you may not have related that, but as a result, the grandmothers aren't taking care of the children. The grandmothers aren't teaching different things, and there's a lost level of generational wisdom to some of the youth. So I invite you to have an open heart. I just want to move quickly. I know my time is up, but everybody else's was too. So the program, this program that I worked on called Belief was with Oprah Winfrey. Did any of you get to see the Belief series? Okay, this one. I did at the Parliament of the World Religions. This is a program Oprah paid for and solicited a group of filmmakers to go out and create a program, a film, a short, because they were all less than 10 minutes, of what our beliefs were. So they had a young Jewish boy who was having his bar mitzvah. They had someone in India who was going to a festival. They had images and a story about a young teenage black girl who was getting baptized in the river. All of these were to help people understand different beliefs. Because most of us don't know. We know about our belief, but we don't know about other churches, centers, Sufi swirling dancing. You know, it was so interesting to be exposed to these things. And the point of belief, and she came up with this idea with several people, was to show films in a group. And I was responsible to work with New Thought groups. They had somebody else managing the traditional churches, and I invited New Thought organizations to do this work. And many of you did, many of you participated. You had lunches or afternoon teas or programs where you'd show the film. We sent DVDs out, people showed films, we invited people to talk about them and make a difference, and we introduced it at the Parliament of the World's Religions in 2018. So that was a major program I was a part of. And the last thing I want to share, two things. I'm going to take a breath here. I had the opportunity to be taught by some amazing people in the movement of nonviolence. Dr. James Lawson was Dr. King's teacher. He was the master of nonviolence. And I got to go to his program. He was in Los Angeles, the minister of a church, but he did nonviolence work all over the world. And I was part of a program there and knew him for the last 20 years. But the reason these four men are on the slide is because they all passed away in the last 2 months. I knew you probably didn't know that. Dr. Cecil Williams was in San Francisco at Glide Memorial. When I was first in New Thought at Firelight Church of Religious Science in San Jose, we participated in Season for Nonviolence, and we'd get together in San Jose and invite other churches to join us. We'd take the train up to San Francisco. Any of you been to San Francisco? We go to the inn on Market Street. Everybody would gather from San Jose, from the Upper Peninsula, from Oakland, and we'd have hundreds of people, and we'd march almost a mile from the end of Market Street to Glide Memorial. That was 30 years ago. Cecil Williams was the minister there. He did homeless work and everything else. And he was an icon, really, in the city, created opportunities for those who didn't have jobs. He died this year. He was 94. Cecil Murray was in Los Angeles, active, worked with the mayors, did a lot of things for the schools. He died this year. He was a mentor of mine. I went through a program at USC. He was 94. James Lawson was 95. And Dexter Scott King was only 62. I bring this up because some of the icons of this work have all left the physical. And somebody needs to step in. So I'm going to end it by saying this is my recommendation. New thought needs to be a part of the change we want to see. Amen. New thought needs to do the work and bring the consciousness so that we can make changes from the inside out. And there are 3 recommendations I have. Start having some healing conversations. I think you all are doing that already. Right now, this country is in turmoil. In consciousness, in action, in attitude. I encourage you all to have some pre and post election conversations. They may not be pretty, but they're needed. And I also encourage you to look at affinity groups, whether by race or by sex, because sometimes you need the separation in order to tell your whole truth, because you know those people will understand. The second recommendation I have is that we collaborate on a series of interfaith celebrations. Let's start doing this together, share dialogues, beliefs, food, sacred celebrations. And then the third thing is to commit next year to the season for nonviolence. If you stopped doing it in your church or you never did it, please embrace this amazing program. To honor the icons that I got to study with, but more so to bring the consciousness. Dolores Huerta is one of the people that I have met and loved, and I feel so connected with you from that experience. But the season for nonviolence, they live from a place of nonviolence. We don't, right? I'm not part of that we. But what I'm saying is it needs to be the first thought that comes in your mind of how do we do this together. So these are my recommendations on what new thought can do to create change and create a new world. Thank you.
Ooh, yes, yes. Let me ask, Reverend Wilkins told us a lot. Are there any questions? We have just very few minutes for questions, but do you have any questions? Each of your communities, your churches, where you are, we just put a lot of information out, and this will be on video at some point. But it's really, thank you for being here. Share it, share it. Social justice is what our principles are. If all of our principles were fully lived, we would have a world that was perfect, as we do, but we need to manifest it. And I just like to add, I mentioned it the other day. I said I was going to mention it once again, and that's David Alexander's My Election Intention. And what I love about this is he's not telling you, as we don't tell you who to vote for, but we want you to have a mindset that will create a consciousness of peace, no matter who does what, how they do it, come November 4th. So there's 100 days of mindful practice, July 28th to November 4th. What does it consist of? Daily mindful messages from thought leaders, weekly Zoom community check-ins, intentional community building based on proven somatic healing practices. Time out the fear, tune in the vision. Time out the fear, tune in the vision. And how do you get involved? You text JOIN, J-O-I-N, to 470-784-0250. Again, text JOIN, J-O-I-N, to 470-784-0250. I didn't
have an opportunity to mention one program that has been available for a period of time put on by the Association of Global New Thought and the Centers for Spiritual Living, I was able to get funded to help my launch the program that is called Spiritually Guided SUM, SUM, which is Social Uplift Ministry. And I wanted to mention that because...
Do you have email or something that they can contact you?
You could go on Agent,
AGNT.
and it has a whole list of all the kinds of activities that there are lesson plans available for people to use that relate to a significant number of things. And I tried some of them and didn't have a chance to talk about it, but I just thought at least if you could go on, you can find out what curriculum is available and whether or not it's something that you can use. But I think it's a very dynamic program, and I use it for during the time of COVID that was taking place with Merritt Community College young kids that were going all over the nation.
Awesome.
And I thought they were doing a dynamic job, especially with the support of Ella Hugh Harris and Barbara Lee. And so forth. So
thank you. It's on AGNT. That's what's important. Yes.